All right, this video is going to be for section 2.1, where we're going to look at the rectangular coordinate system and graphs. So we're going to do a quick review of the coordinate grid, where we look at our x and y axis. So x is your horizontal axis, y is your vertical axis. Terms for the point are point, coordinate, ordered pair. They all come in this little point here, and it always goes x comma y. So your horizontal number is always first and then your vertical number. The origin is the name for the point right in the middle, that's 0, 0. And our quadrants go counterclockwise. So we start here in quadrant 1, and then we go to the left, 2, 3, 4. And any point that lies on an axis, so if you fall on the x or y axis, you are not in a quadrant. So just for a quick review of how to plot points, if we look at A here, -2, 4, that tells us we go -2 on the x, so we're going to go 2 to the left, and then we would go up 4 on the y, and then we plot where they meet, so that is in quadrant 2, written in Roman numerals. B would be 3, 3, so we go 3 on the x, 3 on the y, plot where they meet, that's in quadrant 1. And then C is going to be 0 on the x, so we're going to stay right on that y-axis, and then we go down 3, so that green point, and that is not in a quadrant because it is on the y-axis. So why don't you take a second and try plotting the following coordinates. Pause the video and then check it out. So A is going to be 4, -2, so that's this point right here in quadrant 4. B is 0, 4, so that's on the y-axis, so it is not in a quadrant. And C is -3, -5, so that's this point, which is in quadrant 3. So a linear equation is an equation that's going to draw a line. And when we say it's an equation in two variables, it just means it has two letters, or generally we're x and y. So if we're plotting the equation y equals 2x minus 1, one way to plot that is to just plug in various x values and then plot those on the graph. So here's a table that has several x values. So we're just going to take those numbers and plug them in, just as if this was function notation. So we're going to take this equation, and where we see x, we're going to put -3. And then we're going to evaluate. So 2 times -3 is -6. -6 minus 1 is -7. And now we have the coordinate -3, -7 that we can plot on the graph. So -3, -7 is right here. And then we do that again, this time with -2. So 2 times -2 is -4, minus 1 is -5. So now we have the point -2, -5. -2, -5. Then we'll do -1. 2 times -1 is -2, minus 1 is -3. So now I have the point -1, -3. If I did the next one, 0. 2 times 0 is 0. 0 minus 1 is -1. So I have the point 0, -1. And you may already be able to see the pattern and keep going from there. You may not. It depends on who you are. As you get in more complex equations, sometimes they're not as easy to see. But for the sake of learning, we're just going to keep plugging in for x. So 2 times 1 is 2. Minus 1 is 1. So now we have the point 1, 1. 2 times 2 is 4. 4 minus 1 is 3. So we have the point 2, 3. And then we'll do the last one. 2 times 3 is 6. 6 minus 1 is 5. So we have the point 3, 5. And now we would just connect our points to draw our line. And knowing that a line goes on and on forever, we would have that graph. If you feel comfortable trying on your own, go ahead and try example 2. If you're not ready to try on your own yet, keep watching. It's up to you. So we have these same numbers here. This time we have the equation y equals negative x plus 2. So here, the equation is negative x. So we're going to put the negative. And then I'm going to put x in parentheses. So I'm going to say negative 3 plus 2. Now, when we have those two negatives in a row, they're going to cancel. So negative 3 is really positive 3. So positive 3 plus 2 is 5. So that gives us a coordinate of negative 3 comma 5. Now I'm going to do the same thing with the negative 2. So negative 2 is positive, and 2 plus 2 is 4. So I have negative 2 comma 4. Then I have negative 1. 1 plus 2 is 3. So I have negative 1 comma 3. And then I'm going to do negative 0 plus 2. So 0 plus 2 is 2. So I have 0 comma 2. Then negative 1 plus 2 is 1. So we have 1, 1. Negative 2 plus 2 is 0. So this becomes 2 comma 0. And the last point is going to be negative 3 plus 2, which is negative 1. So we have negative 3, negative 1. And then we would go plot these points on the graph. So negative 3, 5. Negative 2, 4. Negative 1, 3. 0, 2. 1, 1. 2, 0. And negative 3, negative 1. There's our line. So don't forget to pay attention to where those negative signs fall. So you should pause the video and try this one, and then come back and check it. All right, so 1/2 times the negative 3 plus 2. So half of negative 3 would be negative 1.5. And negative 1.5 plus 2 is 0.5. So this point becomes negative 3 comma 0.5. You could leave it as fractions as you want and have negative 3 1/2. That's completely up to you. Next one, negative 1/2, or no, 1/2 times negative 2 is negative 1. And negative 1 plus 2 is 1. So this point becomes negative 2 comma 1. Next point, negative 1/2, or no, 1/2 times negative 1 is negative 1/2. And negative 1/2 plus 2 becomes 1.5. So this becomes negative 1, 1.5. 1/2 times 0 is 0. So 0 plus 2 is 2. So you get 0 comma 2. 1/2 times 1 is 1/2. So 1/2 plus 2 is 2.5. So 1 comma 2.5. 1/2 times 2 is 1. So 1 plus 2 is 3. So this becomes 2 comma 3. And then 1/2 times 3 is 1.5. And 1.5 plus 2 is 3.5. So this becomes 3 comma 3.5. So then over here we would plot those points. Negative 3 comma 1/2. Negative 2 comma 1. Negative 1 comma 1.5. 0 comma 2. 1 comma 2.5. 2 comma 3. And 3 comma 3.5. So just like we could use slope-intercept form, you can also use a table. Both of those things work. Another way to graph is to use your calculator. So I'm just going to put this equation in. So if you have your graphing calculator or your app or your online tool, the y equals button is the top left button over here, y equals. To type X, you're going to use the button right next to the green one. It's the button that has the X and the T and the theta and the N. It's right next to the green button. So if I were to type that, I would do 1 divided by 2, probably in parentheses, and then hit that X button, and then plus 2. And you could hit graph, but depending on what else you've been doing, there could be lots of other things. So if you hit zoom, which is the top middle button, and then 6, that's going to bring it to a 10 by 10 grid. And then you'll see that same line that we just drew right here. So there are ways to graph them on your calculator as well. All right, the next thing we're going to talk about is finding intercepts. So the y-intercept is where the graph crosses the y-axis. So that means x equals 0. The x-intercept is where it crosses the x-axis. So that means y equals 0. So to find those, you just plug 0 in for those letters in the equation. So example 3, in this equation, if we're trying to find the y-intercept, we're going to make x equal 0. So we're going to take that equation, but instead of x, we're going to plug in 0. So negative 3 times 0 is 0, and 0 minus 4 is negative 4. So the y-intercept is negative 4. Now to find the x-intercept, y has to equal 0. So we're going to rewrite that equation, but instead of y this time, we're going to put 0. And now we're going to solve for x. So I'm going to add 4 to both sides. And now I'm going to divide by negative 3 in order to get x alone. So I have negative 4/3 equals x. So that's our x-intercept. And then over here we have our y-intercept. So why don't you go ahead and pause the video and try this one. So to get our y-intercept, we're going to make x equals 0. So 3/4 times 0 is 0. 0 plus 3 is 0. So the y-intercept is 3. For the x-intercept, I'm going to make y equals 0. So I'm going to write 0 equals negative 3/4 x plus 3. I'm going to subtract 3 from both sides. So I'm going to say 0 equals negative 3/4 x. To get that 4 off the bottom, I lied. 0 minus 3 is negative 3. To get that 4 off the bottom, I'm going to multiply both sides by 4, because that's how you undo the division of a fraction. Negative 3 times 4 is negative 12. So negative 12 equals negative 3x. Then, if I divide both sides by negative 3, x is alone. So negative 12 divided by negative 3 is 4. So 4 equals x. Now I have my x and my y-intercepts. All right. The other thing the last couple things that the coordinate plane is good for is helping us find the distance and midpoint between 2 points. So we talked about slope on the last test. So if you're given 2 points, you can find the slope between them using those same 2 points. So if I give you point 1, and that is x1 comma y1, and I give you point 2, and we call that x2 comma y2, we can find the distance using the distance formula. So what we're going to do is, if you look, it's very similar to the slope formula, except instead of making a fraction out of them, we're going to subtract the x's and the y's, square them, and add them together. So there's that formula. And what we're going to do is we're going to subtract the x's, square them, subtract the y's, square them, add them together, and take the square root. So if we go here, big square root, we're going to do x1 minus x2. So negative 3 minus 2 squared. Then we do y1 minus y2. So we put plus there. Then y1 minus y2 squared. Now we'll do that math. So big square root again. -3 minus 2 is -5. And 1 minus 3 is -2. Right? 1 minus 3, yeah. Okay. So now, -5 times -5 is 25. And 2 times 2 is 4. And then 25 plus 4 is 29. And now I'm just going to take the square root of 29. So second square root, oops, quit out of there. Second square root, 29. I get 5.39. So that is the distance. You also can just type this in the calculator. So if you wanted to do a big square root and then parentheses, -3 minus 2, close parentheses, squared, plus parentheses, 1 minus 3, close parentheses, squared, you're going to get the same answer. So you don't have to do all the steps out. That's up to you. That's your preference how you'd rather do it. So why don't you pause the video and do the U-try. All right. So we're going to do this one. So 1 minus 11 squared plus 4 minus 9 squared. All right. 1 minus 11 is -10. 4 minus 9 is -5. 10 squared is 100. And then -5 squared is 25. 100 plus 25 is 125. And then the square root of 125 is 11.18. All right. And then the other formula is the midpoint formula. So using those same points, this time we're adding the x's and dividing by 2 to get a new x coordinate. And we're adding the y's and dividing by 2 to get a y coordinate. So it's like we're finding an average of the coordinates is really what we're doing. So if we have our points here, what's going on? Okay. So for the x's, we're going to do 7 plus 9 divided by 2. So 7 plus 9 is 16. And 16 divided by 2 is 8. And then for the y's, we're going to do -2 plus 5 divided by 2. So -2 plus 5 is 3. And 3 divided by 2 is 1.5. So that point, 8, 1.5, is going to end up in the middle of those 2 points if it was one line. So why don't you pause the video and try this last one. All right, so for the x, we'd have -2 plus -8 divided by 2, which would be -10 over 2, which would be -5. All right, and then if we did the y's, -1 plus 6 over 2 would end up being 5 over 2, so 2.5. So the midpoint would be -5, 2.5. So that is section 2.1. Let me know if you have any questions.